Recording in progress. So the temptations and the failure of evil are Hashem's servants. They were created by Hashem.
Okay, everybody, we're just waiting for the first class to be over, and then we'll start our class.
Recording stopped.
Hi, ladies.
Hi.
How are you all? How's everybody feeling?
Hashem, how are you?
Baruch Hashem. Good. It's good to see everybody. Hi, Marcel. Hi, Yehudis. Hi, Davida. Hi, Elaine. Hi, Gitzi. Hi, Rabbi Simchana. Who do I see at the bottom of my screen? 1 second. Rabbi Rachel. Hi, Rabbi Rachel. Okay. Let's start to learn. And hi to everybody.
Please, record.
Say it again.
Recording in progress.
Yeah? Ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ready.
Okay.
Ready.
Good. Hi, everybody, on a beautiful, beautiful day here in Yerushalayim Yer Kodesh, Wednesday, the 23rd of Iyar, the 38th day of the Omer. Today is called Tiferet of Yesod. And the shortest way I can say that is just be nice to each other. That's the best way to sum up today. Let's first learn the parsha, and then if we have time, we'll go back to do the Sefira. We have two parashios, Bahar B'chokosai. We're finishing the book of Vayikra, Chazak, Chazak, V'nid Chazek. And we have really a chock-full parsha. Two parashiyot, very, very full. The beginning of the parsha of Bahar talks about Shemitah. Actually, both parashiyot, if you read them both, you'll see that they're talking about blessings and the opposite of blessings, and how we bring blessings into our life. And Hashem says to us very straight, in an era, in a time when everyone is doing the right thing, and there's blessings that come into the world. Now, we are at the very, very end of time, and so we are catching up. All the generations that we've lived in, all the lives that we've lived, and the history of the world, we're catching that up right now. That's what we're doing, in this year, Tavshin Pei, and whatever it is in Goyish. But on a certain level, the parashiyos, Bahar B'chokosai, are just giving us the concept of spiritual cause and effect. Spiritual cause and effect. Certainly not physical cause and effect, because as the Ramban says in this week's parasha, that there's no such thing. We all know the Ramban and the Rambam both talk about reward, and they talk about, is there a reward in this world? You do a good deed, someone slaps you in the face, right? One of my colleagues from America, he needs a full shlema, he used to say, when you do somebody a favor, don't stand too close, because when they throw rocks at you, if you stand farther away, it won't hurt you so much. That's another way of saying is no good deed goes unpunished. okay, we see that in this world. You're nice to someone, you bend over backwards, and then whatever, they don't understand, they don't appreciate, they have expectations of more. You don't need me to expand on this, right? Everybody in their own world with their own little malchus. So the Ramban says the chiddush here in these parashiyos of Bahar B'chukosai, because Bahar is talking about tzedakah, charity, and we'll see in a second what that means. And B'chukosai goes into all the blessings and the curses of what happens to us when we don't keep anything in the Torah. So both of these parashiyos are the same idea of bringing blessings into the life, bringing blessings into the world, and how the mechanism of that works. The Ramban says the miracle of Parshas Bahar and B'chukosai is like this. In the world of nature, if you make effort, one second, I have to plug in my computer. 1 second. Oh, thank you, computer, for reminding me. Otherwise, everybody would go blank. 1 sec. Okay, hope that helps. In the world of the physical, in the world of nature, if you make hishtadlus, if you make effort in the physical world, and you see results in the physical world, that makes sense. In the spiritual world, if you make efforts in the spiritual world, and you see results in the spiritual world, that makes sense. But the Ramban points out, if you make effort in the spiritual world and you see results in the physical world, that's above nature. And that's what Hashem is telling us here. And when we talk about the beginning of Parshas Bahar, it talks about Shemitah and talks about, Shabbos and Parnasa, making a living, having money, giving charity, being generous, remembering that you're not the balabas here, that we're not the balabayit, that Hashem is the balabayit here. That whole concept that Hashem is in charge, and again, depending on how much of a percentage of our life we truly live like that, that's how much Hashem inputs into our life, the results in tangible results that we can see. Because if you put your finger into the fire, you're going to get a burn. And if you are hungry and you're healthy and you eat something, you're going to be full. That's called natural cause and effects. There are certain cause and effects that Hashem made in this world, but they get enhanced when a person is totally living in the world of emunah and bitachon. So Bahar B'chukosai says like this. The beginning says, if you own land. Now remember that when we got the mitzvahs, we were still in the desert. We had just received the Torah. We were not yet in Eretz Yisrael. Hashem says, when you come into the land, you're going to come into the land, which, by the way, that's just in and of itself such a happy pasuk, right? You're going to come into the land. Ki tavo el haaretz asher ani noten lechem. You're going to come into the land. And when you do, you're going to keep Shemitah. And why are you going to keep Shemitah? Not because not because it's agriculturally healthy for the land, which everybody knows it is. I'm not a farmer, so I grew up in the city, so I don't know all the things about plant. And I never had a big garden. I don't know all the things about how you make gardens and how you fertilize the soil and all of that. But we know that just from studying, we know that it's a thing in the world that they tell you, don't work something too hard because you'll drain it of all of its power, and then it breaks. You have to even give the land a rest. So regular farmers, I don't know, I never spoke to a regular non-Jewish farmer, but I'm just curious, regular non-Jewish farmers, do they leave their land fallow once every certain amount of years? I don't know. And do they rotate the crops that they do? But the Torah says it's not about that. The Torah says it's about our having a correct understanding of how to live in this world financially. And the correct understanding is Hashem is in charge of our finances. He decrees our finances on Rosh Hashanah. He does not include in that decree what we spend on Shabbos, what we spend on tzedakah, charity, what we spend on mitzvah. That He doesn't include in the budget that He gives us on Rosh Hashanah. And the more we spend on mitzvot, the more, the money comes back to us. In other words, there's a regular budget, and then there's the mitzvah budget. The mitzvah budget is unlimited. Whatever you spend, it's not connected to the regular budget. It's a completely separate budget altogether. So for the mitzvah budget, don't think that if I spend from the mitzvah budget, then I'm going to deprive myself of my rent money. Those are two separate budgets, and they don't interface, they don't interact, except for charity. So Hashem says, if you give a lot of charity, I'll increase even your regular budget. The regular budget that I increased, that I gave for you on I decree for Rosh Hashanah, that gets increased. Your rent money gets increased. Everything, your pocket money gets increased the more charity you give. But if you buy a beautiful esrog, or you make aliyah, and you buy a beautiful apartment, that's a separate budget altogether, because that's mitzvah money. And mitzvah money, Hashem doesn't cheshbon in to your original budget. And that's important for us to know. So I'm going to tell you a story that happened this week, and I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I don't understand it, and you can't make a general rule from this, and each person has to ask their own particular question about how to financially run their life. But I'm just going to tell you a story that happened this week with my Rav. The Rav Tzaddik the Yanuka. Somebody came to him this week and asked him, and this is not the first time that this question has been raised, but each person comes on their own and asks for their own life. Somebody said like this: they need to buy an apartment. The family is expanding, and they don't want to rent anymore. They want to buy an apartment here, and of course they're Israelis here in Eretz Yisrael. And they said, should we buy a 3-room apartment or a 5-room? The Rav said, do you need a 3-room or do you need a 5-room? What do you need? How many bedrooms do you need? Do you need 1 bedroom, or do you need 3 bedrooms? So the man said, we have a lot of kids. We need 3 bedrooms, 1 for the boys, 1 for the girls, 1 for the parents. Otherwise, where will everybody sleep? In the living room. Parents will have a room with the little babies, whoever, and then the kids will sleep in the living room. So the Rav said, buy the 5-bedroom. What's the question? You need a 5-bedroom, buy the 5-bedroom. So the man said, but it's a lot more expensive. The Rav said, that's not how it works. It doesn't work like that. You have to, now again, I'm going to qualify this a million times, that everyone has to ask their own particular question, and everyone has to live with the amount of emunah and bitachon that they really are on the level. You can't fake emunah and bitachon, because it turns into ulcers if you don't have. So the Rav said, for Hashem, a 3-bedroom and a 5-bedroom is the same. Hashem is giving you the money for the 3-bedroom. It happens to be that you have that money in your bank right now. Hashem is giving you the money for the 5-bedroom. It happens to be that he'll have to give it to you in installments, and you're going to have to pay a mortgage. It's all Hashem's money. It's all money that's given that God is giving. So if you need a 5-bedroom, a 5-room, you have to buy a 5-room. That's all. There's nothing to talk about. What you need is what you need to buy. We don't live extravagant. We're not talking about taking on a vacation to Hawaii when you don't have money. We're talking about basic needs. Hashem is in charge. And then the Rav said something crazy. He said, amazing. He said, listen, if you're thirsty, you're in the street, and you're working hard, and you have to run from one mitzvah to another, and it's a hot day, and you're thirsty. You run into the makola, you buy yourself a bottle of water, correct? Why? Because you need the water. Are you worried about the 5 shekels it costs you to buy the bottle of water? No, because you need the water right now. You're thirsty. You don't think about the money. If you have it, you buy it. If you're not, you put it on your credit card. But you need the water. He said, it's the same. The Rav said it's the same thing. Hashem is who supplies you the water. Hashem is who supplies you the 5 shekel and the 5 million shekel. Now, again, I'm qualifying. I'm beginning and ending with everybody has to be real with that. If you can't live like that, then you can't live like that. But you should know that that's how tzaddikim live. The tzaddik lives exactly like that. The tzaddik says, it's no difference to me, a person who's healthy and a person who's not healthy. Hashem is the one who's healing that healthy person. Hashem is the one who's healing the non-healthy person. Hashem is doing everything. It's all Hashem. That's how tzaddikim live, in that mindset. And me and you can at least tell stories about tzaddikim. And we can have aspirations to try to upgrade our level of emunah bitachon. But that's the parsha. The parsha is talking about you're going to come into the land, you're going to work the land, and I'm going to give you Shemitah once a year. You don't work the land the whole 1 year. And not just that, but every 50 years, every 7 cycles of Shemitah, you're going to have 2 years, because The 49th year of the cycle, which right now we don't know what year we're in because of the Golus, we lost count. But the 49th year is the seventh year, right? It's the seventh year, it's Shemitah. Then the year after that, which is the 8th year, which is the first year of the new cycle, is not called that. It's called Yovel. There's a whole different thing that's going on. It's called Yovel. And in the Yovel, there's the same halachas as Shemitah. You don't plant, you don't prune, you don't cultivate your fields. So the Torah says, and this is one of the proofs that the Torah is written by God, and because nobody else would, no one, if a person would be writing a Torah, and they wanted to convince the world, they would not write the following pasuk, and the pasuk says, and if you ask me, what are you going to eat all of these years? I'm going to give you enough, says Hashem, in the 6th year, for the 6th, 7th, and 8th year, 3 years. In the 8th year, you're still not planting because it's Yovel in that 50-year cycle. And then until the crops of the 9th year come in, you can plant already in the 9th year. Until those crops come in, I'm going to give you enough food for this on the 6th year for 3 years. And only Hashem could make that promise, and only Jews who lived through that every in the times of in times when we were able to. Before the exile, before the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash, when we all had these, we lived in this cycle. Every Shemitah year and every Yovel year, everybody got like an injection, not of chemicals that are harmful, an injection of emun and bitachon, because they saw with their own eyes that in the 6th year they didn't do anything different. Just they knew Shemitah was coming, and they were planning on keeping Shemitah. So in the 6th year, they got triple the bonus that they got in the 5th year, in the 4th year, in the 3rd year. They got so much food that they had to store it up. They had to figure out ways of storage that it could last them till the beginning of the 9th year when the new crops would come in. That was in the Shemitah cycle, and it was in the Yovel cycle. Every Shemitah, it happened every 7 years. The 6th year produced double. You had enough for the 6th and for the 7th. So that by the time the 7th was over and you were planting the 8th already, you had enough to last you until the 8th, until the crops of the 8th year blossomed. That happened every 7 years. But on every 50 years, they saw even triple. They saw the triple of the nace. And what's the whole point of that? The whole point of that is that it's a lesson that humanity has a hard time with. It's 5,785 years. We still haven't integrated this lesson on a total scale. And that is, we are not in charge. Hashem is in charge, period. It's all Hashem. We have to make hishtadlus because we have to make effort because it's a mitzvah to make effort. But it's not us. If you plant, sometimes you can plant and then it flourishes. Sometimes you plant, it doesn't flourish. Next door's field is not flourishing. Your field is gorgeous. Why is that? It's not because of, it's because Hashem decided for whatever Hashem's reason. And then the Torah in the Parsha talks about, it continues and talks about how if a person has to sell their land. Now, why would a person have to sell their land? Or if a person has to sell themselves into slavery, why would a person have to do that? So Rashi explains, very simple. If a person keeps the mitzvahs of Shemitah and Yovel, and is generous, and by the way, in the midst of Shemitah, who can come into your field? Anybody can come in. There's no more fences. There's no locks. Everything is open. All the gates are open, and anybody can come into your field. Whatever grew wild, they can take. All the fruit trees that grow from year to year, they can take any fruit that they want. Anything that's any sfichim, that means any vegetables that happen to grow in the 7th year because somehow it's still you didn't plant it, but somehow it grew from the 7th. From the last year, they can. Anybody can take. And by the way, that includes also the mitzvahs to remind ourselves the mitzvah of leket shich peah, that even when it's not the 7th year, we have to give part of our field, we have to give to the poor people and support them. And that's, of course, coming up to the story of Ruth, right? Megillas Ruth, that Ruth was supporting her mother-in-law Naomi by going and collecting through us collecting food from the field of Boaz, right? And she did the mitzvah tzedakah for her mother-in-law, and Hashem did the mitzvah tzedakah for her and made her the mother of Malchus and David Melech and Mashiach. So all the mitzvahs of charity are in this parsha. And if a person is not charitable, chas v'shalom, then he has to either sell himself into slavery, which means I need to, I'm in. A person who sells himself into slavery, a Jew, can only do it for 6 years, and they're basically saying to the person that they owe money to, listen, I owe you money, I can't pay it, I'll work for you and I'll work off the debt. Or they'll say, I don't have any money to support my family, can you please hire me and I'll work for you as a slave, as a servant. And of course, there's halacha, there's laws about the owner and how he can treat his slaves. And there's halachas of the slave and what mitzvahs he's incumbent upon. All these laws. It's all the Parshas Bahar, and it all follows a certain pattern of if you're charitable and you go out of your way to help people, then, and you keep Shemitah, and you keep all the laws of the Torah, then you won't have to sell yourself to slavery. You won't have to work hard to find a job. You won't have to sell any of your property, and the family property, etc., etc. That's this parsha. And then it says in the end, don't make, in the end of Parshas Bahar, it says,